always thought the worst betrayals came from lovers. I was wrong. The cruelest kind, the one that cuts the deepest, comes from family. Because when the knife goes in, it's not just the sharpness of the blade you feel. It's the memory of every shared laugh, every childhood secret, every moment you thought you were safe with them. That's what twists the wound until it never closes. And I wish I could tell you I saw it coming. That there were signs, whispers in the dark, moments where my brother's jealousy shone through. But the truth? I was blind. Blind because I loved him. Blind because I trusted him. Blind because I never thought the person who shared my blood would also plot my downfall. It started years ago, long before I realized. But if you're listening, you need the whole picture. You need to see the cracks before the house collapsed. Because when I tell you what my brother did, you won't believe a man could be that cruel to his own sister. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everyone knows your name, and gossip travels faster than the wind. My brother, Daniel, was 2 years older than me. From the outside, we looked close. People said we were inseparable. He'd walk me to school, sit with me at church, protect me from the kids who liked to pick on me. My parents liked to boast about our bond, like we were proof that family could still mean something in a world where neighbors barely nodded hello anymore. But what they didn't see, what I didn't even realize at the time, was how much of Daniel's identity was tied up in keeping me under his shadow. He thrived on being the big brother. He needed me to need him. And the moment I stopped needing him, everything fell apart. I was 16 when I discovered my talent, singing. It wasn't just a hobby, it was the only thing that made me feel alive. I remember standing in my room, door shut, whispering along to songs on the radio because I was too shy to sing out loud. Until one night, Daniel barged in without knocking, like he always did, and caught me. I froze. But instead of laughing, he just stared at me, like he'd just uncovered a secret treasure. "Do that again," he said. His voice wasn't mocking, it was commanding. I can't," I stammered. But he wouldn't leave. "Sing, right now, or I'll tell Mom what you were doing." So I sang. A shaky verse, my throat dry, my hands trembling. And when I finished, he didn't clap, didn't smile. He just nodded once and said, "You're good. Don't tell anyone else. Not yet." At the time, I thought he was protecting me. That he wanted me to grow before I shared my gift. I didn't see the possessiveness. I didn't see the way he wanted to control me. But that was Daniel. He had this way of making you believe his interference was care, when really it was chains. By the time I turned 18, I was auditioning for college music programs. I dreamed of leaving our town, of standing on a stage under bright lights where no one knew my last name, where I wasn't just Daniel's little sister. I wanted to be me. Just me. And that's when the sabotage began. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you to the night it all started unraveling. The night that should have been the beginning of my future, but instead marked the slow destruction of everything I'd worked for. It was my senior year showcase. The auditorium smelled faintly of dust and old wood, the kind that clung to your clothes long after you left. My dress was simple, black with a satin ribbon tied at my waist. Nothing flashy. I wasn't there to dazzle with sequins. I wanted my voice to be enough. Daniel drove me. He insisted. Said it was his duty as my brother to see me off, to be my #1 fan. He even fixed my hair in the rearview mirror, brushing away strands with that practiced older brother smile. "You're gonna kill it," he said. "I'm nervous," I whispered, picking at my nails. "That's good, however," he replied. "Means you care." He had a way of grounding me, of making me feel safe. And that's why what he did later, what I would discover piece by piece, felt like a violation deeper than anything else. That night, I sang like my life depended on it. The spotlight burned hot against my skin, but I didn't care. The applause afterward thundered in my chest. I saw faces I didn't recognize. Talent scouts, professors, people who mattered, and they were looking at me. Really looking at me. I thought it was the start of everything. But when I came off stage, flushed with adrenaline, Daniel was waiting. His arms folded, his face unreadable. "You were good," he said flatly. "Just good?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood. "Good," he repeated. No smile, no warmth, and something in my gut twisted. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first fracture. That was the night he realized I was slipping from his grasp. That if I left for college, if I built a life of my own, he'd lose me. The first sign came weeks later, in the form of a letter. I'd applied to 3 schools with strong music programs. I checked the mailbox every day like it was Christmas morning. And one afternoon, there it was. An envelope stamped with the crest of my top choice. My hands shook as I ripped it open. I was accepted. I screamed. I jumped. I cried. I ran to Daniel, waving the letter in his face. I got in. He looked at it once, then handed it back without expression. "That's great." "Great?" I laughed. "Daniel, this is everything I've wanted. This is my chance." His eyes flickered, just for a second, with something I couldn't place. Resentment, fear, possession. But he just said, "Guess that means you'll be leaving soon." The words weren't congratulations. They were a sentence. And in that moment, I didn't know I should have been afraid. Because my brother would rather burn my future to ashes than watch me walk away. That's how it began. The subtle unraveling, the secrets, the lies, the kind of sabotage that hides in plain sight, wearing the mask of love. And when I finally discovered just how deep Daniel's betrayal went, it was already too late. The letter from my dream school wasn't just paper. It felt like escape in my hands. I pressed it to my chest like if I held it close enough, no one could take it away from me. But Daniel's reaction, that flat voice, that blank look, gnawed at me. At dinner that night, Mom cried when I told them the news. Dad beamed, talking about scholarships and possibilities. Our little girl, the first to leave home and chase something bigger, he said, pride rolling off him in waves. And then there was Daniel, stabbing at his food, silent. Daniel, Dad said, aren't you proud of your sister? Daniel looked up, his jaw tight. Yeah, proud. But his eyes told a different story. They were dark, stormy, like he was watching something slip through his fingers. At the time, I brushed it off. He just wasn't good at emotions, I told myself. He didn't know how to say the right thing. I excused him, like I always did. I should have paid attention. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation, packing, financial aid meetings, late-night rehearsals, as I dreamed of my new life. But little things began happening. Small enough to dismiss, big enough to leave splinters in the back of my mind. One morning, my acceptance letter was gone. I tore my room apart, searching, frantic, until Daniel appeared in the doorway. Lose something? My letter, I snapped, panic rising in my throat. He shrugged. Probably just misplaced it. You're scatterbrained like that. And then, days later, it reappeared, tucked under my bed, folded neatly. Too neatly. Like someone had placed it there. I told myself it was me, that I'd forgotten, that I was overthinking. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The real fracture came the night of my graduation party. The backyard was strung with fairy lights, cheap plastic tables groaning under casseroles and cakes neighbors had brought. Music drifted from a Bluetooth speaker. Everyone was laughing, celebrating, hugging me like I was already gone. But Daniel was quiet. He hovered near me all night, intercepting conversations, cutting in whenever someone mentioned my college plans. So proud of you, sweetheart, Mrs. Miller from down the street said, clutching my hands. Before I could respond, Daniel leaned in. Well, nothing's final yet. She still has to figure out finances. It's not easy, you know. I blinked at him. Daniel. But Mrs. Miller just patted his arm sympathetically. Of course, one step at a time. And just like that, the conversation shifted away from my success to my uncertain future. He did it again and again, undercutting, casting shadows, turning my night of triumph into a murmur of doubts. When I confronted him later, his voice was sharp. I'm just being realistic. Don't let them fill your head with fairy tales. It's not a fairy tale, it's my life, I shouted. He stepped closer, his face inches from mine, his eyes burning. Your life? Don't forget who's been there for you every step of the way. Who's driven you to auditions? Who's listened to you practice? You think you'd be anywhere without me? The venom in his tone froze me. I had never heard him speak to me like that. And for the first time, I was afraid of my brother. I should have left then. Should have cut ties, should have packed my bags and gone without looking back. But family. Family makes fools of us all. I wanted to believe he was just scared to lose me. That it came from love, even if it was twisted. But love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't sabotage. And soon, the sabotage wasn't subtle anymore. 2 weeks before move-in day, I got a call from the admissions office. Miss Carter? The woman's voice was polite, professional. We're calling to confirm you've withdrawn your application? My stomach dropped. What? No, I never withdrew. There was a pause, paper rustling. We received an email from your account with your signature, requesting a withdrawal. My blood ran cold. That wasn't me. Please, you have to believe me. I want to attend. The woman sighed. We'll need to look into this. Can you resend your confirmation? My hands shook as I hung up, bile rising in my throat. I ran to my laptop, digging through my email. And there it was. A sent message I didn't remember sending. My name typed neatly at the bottom. But the words weren't mine. I stumbled into Daniel's room without knocking. He was on his bed, scrolling his phone. Did you send an email from my account? My voice cracked with panic. He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. Someone tried to withdraw me from school. It wasn't me. He tilted his head. Maybe you forgot. You've been stressed. My chest tightened. Daniel, tell me the truth. He set his phone down, leaned back casually, and smirked. Maybe it's a sign. Maybe you're not ready to leave. The room tilted. My voice broke. You did this. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He just shrugged. And in that moment, I knew. My brother would rather trap me here, in this suffocating house, than watch me step into the world without him. But it didn't stop there. When the school reinstated my acceptance after I proved the email was fraudulent, Daniel grew more desperate. He accidentally forgot to give me important mail. He tampered with my car so it wouldn't start the day I had to visit campus. He spread rumors around town that I was pregnant, unstable, incapable of handling the pressures of college life. Each act chipped away at me, made me doubt myself, made others doubt me. And through it all, he smiled that same brotherly smile. To my parents, to our neighbors, to anyone who questioned him. He was the protective brother, the concerned sibling. No one saw the monster lurking underneath, but I did. Too late. Because the night before I was supposed to leave, Daniel crossed a line so dark, so unforgivable, that it still haunts me to this day. That night, the house was quiet. My suitcases were packed, stacked neatly by the door. I lay in bed, restless with excitement and fear, imagining my future. And then I heard it, my door creaking open. "Daniel," I whispered. He stepped inside, closing it behind him. His face was shadowed, his eyes strange. "You're really going, huh?" His voice was low, almost trembling. "Yes," I said firmly. "Tomorrow." He walked closer, sat on the edge of my bed. I pulled the blanket tighter around me. "You don't have to," he murmured. "You don't have to leave. Everything you need is here. I'm here." "Daniel." My voice cracked. "This isn't healthy." His jaw clenched. "Healthy? I've given up everything for you. Do you even realize that? While you were chasing your little songs, I stayed here. I worked. I made sure you had rides, money, time, and now you just walk away?" Tears burned my eyes. "You're my brother. That's what brothers do." But his face twisted, something raw and ugly spilling through. "No, that's not all I am." And then he touched my hand. I ripped it back, my heart slamming in my chest. "What are you doing?" His breathing quickened. "You don't get it, do you? If you leave, I lose you. And I won't let that happen." The air went still. My body went cold. In that moment, I saw him clearly. Not as my brother, not as my protector, but as someone who would destroy me to keep me his. And I realized tomorrow might not come. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Daniel, get out." But he just sat there, staring at me like he was weighing something in his mind. His eyes glistened with something that made bile rise in my throat. Not sadness, not anger. Hunger. Finally, he stood. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice flat. "We'll see if you really leave." He closed the door softly behind him. I didn't sleep a second that night. When the morning came, my suitcase by the door was gone. I tore the house apart looking for it, frantic, screaming. My parents weren't home. They'd gone to run errands, leaving me and Daniel alone. "Where is it?" I shrieked, barging into his room. He was sitting calmly on his bed, sipping coffee. "Where's what?" "My suitcase." He tilted his head. "Maybe you don't need it. Maybe you should stay." I lunged at him, clawing at his shirt, sobbing. "Give it back. You can't do this to me." He grabbed my wrists, holding me still with terrifying ease. His voice was low, steady. "You'll thank me one day." And then he smiled. That smile, the same one he'd worn when he caught me singing years ago, when he convinced me he was protecting me, was now a mask stretched over pure cruelty. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking, realizing the truth. My brother wasn't just sabotaging me, he was imprisoning me. And I didn't know how far he'd go to keep me there. The morning my suitcase disappeared should have been the morning of my escape. Instead, it became the day I realized how powerless I was in my own home. I sat on the living room floor, knees tucked to my chest, eyes swollen from crying. I kept whispering to myself, "He can't stop me. He won't stop me." But every time I stood to search again, I found nothing. My clothes, my acceptance papers, even my toiletries, all gone. Erased, as if my future had been packed up and buried somewhere I would never find. When my parents came home that afternoon, I expected to explode, to scream the truth until they believed me. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. How do you tell your parents that their golden son, their responsible, dependable Daniel, had stolen your life out from under you? How do you say it without sounding hysterical? Without sounding like the bitter little sister, jealous and dramatic? I tried anyway. "Mom," I said, voice shaking, "my suitcase is gone. Daniel took it. He's trying to stop me from leaving." She frowned, setting down the grocery bag. "Sweetheart, are you sure you didn't just misplace it? You've been so anxious lately." "I didn't misplace it," I snapped, louder than I meant to. "He took it. Ask him." Daniel walked in just then, like he'd been waiting for his cue. Calm, smiling. "What's going on?" he asked, setting down a bag of chips. "Tell them," I hissed. "Tell them what you did." He blinked, feigning confusion. "What I did?" He turned to our parents. "She's been really stressed about leaving. I think she's just overwhelmed." My mother's face softened with sympathy, but not for me. For him. For the liar. "Maybe we should wait a few days before leaving," Dad suggested carefully. "Give you time to breathe." I felt the room spin. "No, don't you see? He's doing this on purpose. He doesn't want me to go." Daniel's eyes flicked to mine, just for a second, and in that flicker, I saw his triumph. He didn't have to fight me anymore. He just had to let me unravel myself. That night, I searched every inch of the house while they slept. I checked closets, the attic, even the crawl space under the stairs. Nothing. Finally, at 3 in the morning, I stepped outside into the humid night air, desperate for clarity. That's when I saw it. My suitcase, locked in the trunk of Daniel's car. Relief surged through me, followed immediately by rage. I could have broken the glass, could have screamed until the neighbors woke, but something inside me stilled. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. Daniel wasn't just sabotaging me out of fear. He was savoring it. The control, the game. And if I confronted him again, he'd only twist it until everyone else thought I was crazy. So I stayed quiet. And I began to plan. The days turned into weeks. My friends left for school, posting pictures of dorm rooms and campus parties, while I remained trapped in the same suffocating town. Each day felt like another layer of dirt being shoveled over me, burying me alive. Daniel acted like nothing had changed. He drove me to work, ate dinner with me, laughed at the same stupid TV shows. To my parents, it looked like we were closer than ever. But when we were alone, his mask slipped. "You're safer here," he'd say softly, brushing my hair from my face like I was still a child. "The world out there doesn't care about you like I do." I started to believe I might never get out, that he'd won. Until one night, I found something that changed everything. I'd gone into Daniel's room while he was in the shower, desperate to look for proof, anything I could use to expose him. His desk drawer was locked, but the key hung from a chain around his lamp. Inside, I found a folder. At first, I thought it was just junk mail. But as I flipped through, my blood went cold. There were printouts of my emails, screenshots of my text messages, even a copy of my college application essays, scribbled over with notes in his handwriting. One note read, "Too confident. Rewrite to sound uncertain." Another, "She'll thank me later." And then, the worst of all, a page where he had written over and over again, like a mantra, "If she leaves, I lose her." I shoved the papers back, heart hammering, and slipped out of his room before he came back. For the first time, I saw my brother clearly. Not as protective, not as misguided, but as obsessed. And I knew then, I had to escape. Not just for my future, but for my life. But escape isn't easy when the enemy sleeps down the hall. I started hiding money in the lining of my purse. I applied to smaller schools, secretly, from the public library computer. I kept a duffel bag under my bed, packed with essentials in case I had to run. All the while, I played the part of the obedient sister. I smiled. I thanked him. I let him believe he still had control. But inside, I was counting down the days. And then, just as I thought I was finally gaining ground, the situation turned darker. It was a Saturday night, late August. The house was quiet. I was in my room when I heard a noise outside the window. A scrape. A shadow moving. My heart stopped. I pulled the curtain back just a sliver, and there he was, Daniel, standing in the yard, staring up at my window. His face was expressionless, his hands shoved in his pockets. He stood there for what felt like hours, just watching, before finally walking away. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened, but I couldn't shake it. He wasn't just sabotaging me anymore. He was surveilling me. When I told my mother, she laughed softly, brushing it off. "Oh, honey, he was probably just getting some air. Don't be so dramatic." I wanted to scream, but instead, I swallowed it. Because I realized then, if I was going to get out, I had to do it alone. No one would save me. And that's when I made the choice that would shatter everything. I decided to use his obsession against him. It started small. I pretended to confide in him. Told him I was scared of leaving, that maybe he was right, that maybe the world was too big for me. His chest puffed up with pride, his hands squeezing my shoulder like he'd won. But underneath, I was watching, calculating, waiting for my chance. The more I pretended, the more he relaxed. He stopped double-checking my phone, stopped hovering at work. And then, one night, he slipped up. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when his phone buzzed on the counter. A text preview lit up the screen. "About your sister. Call me tonight." Curiosity burned through me. Who was he talking to about me? I grabbed the phone and opened the thread. My stomach flipped. It was our pastor. The messages were long, detailed, filled with Daniel's fears about me leaving, about my reckless dreams, about how he thought I wasn't ready for the world. And worse, he'd painted himself as my savior, telling the pastor that he was the only thing standing between me and disaster. The pastor's replies were sympathetic, supportive, encouraging him to do what he felt was right. It wasn't just Daniel anymore. He was building a web, pulling others into his delusion. I dropped the phone back on the counter, my hands trembling. And that's when Daniel walked in. His eyes flicked from me to the phone. His jaw tightened. "What did you see?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. I swallowed hard. Nothing. But his smile told me he didn't believe me. That night, I slept with a chair shoved under my doorknob. It only escalated from there. Daniel's obsession tightened like a noose. He tracked me constantly. If I was 10 minutes late from work, he demanded to know why. If I texted a friend, he wanted to read the message. And then came the night I will never forget. The night that proved just how far he was willing to go. I was walking home from a shift at the diner, the streets quiet under the orange glow of the streetlights. Halfway down the block, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there he was. "Daniel?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What are you doing here?" He stepped closer, his face shadowed. "Making sure you're safe." "I don't need you to..." But before I could finish, he grabbed my arm, hard. "You're not leaving," he hissed. Do you understand me? You're mine. You always will be. The street spun. My chest seized. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Daniel didn't just want to keep me from leaving. He wanted to own me. I pulled free, stumbling backward, my breath coming in gasps. You're sick, I whispered. His eyes darkened. Say whatever you want. But you're not walking away from me. Not now. Not ever. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran. Through the streets, past shuttered storefronts, until I burst through the door of the diner again, collapsing into the arms of my boss. By the time Daniel arrived minutes later, his face was calm, his voice smooth. She's fine, he told them, wrapping an arm around me. She just got scared walking home. And they believed him. Because everyone always believed him. That was the night something inside me snapped. I realized then that if I didn't find a way out soon, Daniel wouldn't just sabotage my future. He'd destroy me entirely. But how do you escape when the person you need to run from is the one everyone else trusts the most? That's when I began planning something darker. Something desperate. Something that would either free me or ruin me forever. I always thought rock bottom was something you'd know when you hit it. Like a violent crash, a shattering sound, some undeniable breaking point. But what I didn't realize was that rock bottom doesn't always happen in one moment. Sometimes it's a series of small falls, each one a little deeper, until you look around and realize you're sitting in the dark with no way out. After the staged betrayal with Claire, after the humiliation at work, after Dad's health started declining, I should have seen the pattern. But denial is seductive. It whispers, maybe it's just bad luck. Maybe your brother loves you more than you think. Maybe the universe isn't conspiring against you. Maybe you're just fragile. And so, I clung to hope. I told myself, if I just keep my head down, if I just work harder, if I just be patient, things will turn around. But Michael didn't want things to turn around. He wanted me trapped. And little by little, he made sure I stayed exactly where he wanted me. I remember one night, sitting in the living room with Mom. Dad was already asleep. He slept more than he was awake by then. His breathing shallow and labored. The TV was on, muted, flickering blue light against the walls. Mom had this distant look in her eyes, the kind of gaze that wasn't really watching the screen, but staring at memories only she could see. She suddenly said, do you ever think maybe you should slow down? Stop chasing all these big dreams? You could build a good life here. Her words stung. I turned to her. Mom, this isn't about slowing down. I'm not meant to just stay here forever. I worked too hard for that. Her voice softened, but her words were sharp. You've already given enough. You'll break yourself if you keep chasing after things that keep slipping away. I looked at her then, really looked at her, the tired lines on her face, the way her hands twisted the blanket nervously. And it hit me. That wasn't her talking. That was Michael. His poison had seeped so deep into her that she believed it was her own thought. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake her and say, don't you see? He's manipulating you. He's manipulating all of us. But instead, I just sat there, swallowing my anger, letting it burn me from the inside out. The next few weeks were a blur of whispered conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. Michael was always in the corner with Mom, always running errands for Dad, always making calls that conveniently ended when I walked into the room. And then came the job interview. A regional company was hiring for a position that was almost tailor-made for me. Same field, good salary, and the best part, it was out of state. I could have had my shot at escape, my chance to finally build a life beyond that suffocating house. I told no one. Not Mom, not Dad, not Michael. I prepared in silence, researching late at night, drafting answers, even picking out the one suit I hadn't seen torn or stained. But somehow, Michael found out. The morning of the interview, I woke up to find my car keys missing. I searched everywhere, under the couch cushions, in my bag, in the junk drawer, nothing. My gut told me exactly where they were, in Michael's pocket. When I confronted him, he leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, a smug little smile playing on his lips. Maybe the universe is trying to tell you something. Maybe you're not supposed to leave. Where are my keys, Michael? He just shrugged. You always think I'm out to get you. Maybe you just lost them. Again. I wanted to punch him, to tear through his pockets and drag out what I knew was mine. But Mom walked in, saw us standing there, tense, and immediately sided with him. Don't start fights so early in the morning. You're going to give your father stress. That was it. My chance slipped away. By the time I figured out an alternative, the interview had passed. Another door closed. Another dream dead. And Michael, he watched me drown in disappointment, and he smiled. The longer this went on, the more the house began to feel like a prison. The walls seemed to close in tighter every day. The air heavier, as if it carried Michael's fingerprints. I started noticing how he rearranged things when I wasn't looking. Small, subtle invasions. My papers would be moved. My phone would go missing and reappear hours later in places I'd already checked. My laptop passwords somehow reset. He was everywhere, erasing my sense of control, making me feel like nothing in my life belonged to me anymore. But the worst was how he twisted the people I loved against me. One afternoon, Dad called me into his room. His voice was weak, but there was something urgent in his eyes. He held my hand and said, "Don't waste your time resenting your brother. He's only looking out for you." My throat tightened. "Dad, you don't know what he's doing. He's sabotaging me. He doesn't want me to have a future." But Dad shook his head, wincing as though even my words were painful. "Family comes first. Your dreams, they don't mean anything if you lose your family in the process." And I realized then, Michael had gotten to him too. Even in his dying state, even with the little strength he had left, he still saw me as the villain. Because Michael had rewritten the narrative. To them, I was selfish, reckless, disloyal. And he was the martyr, the good son, the one who sacrificed for everyone else. It was genius. Cruel, but genius. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted him directly. I found him in the garage, tinkering with tools he never used, pretending to be busy. The smell of oil and dust hung heavy in the air. "You're never going to admit it, are you?" I said, my voice trembling but steady enough. He looked up, smirked. "Admit what?" "That you've been sabotaging me from the start. Every interview, every opportunity, every time I tried to get out, it was you. You can't stand the thought of me leaving because then you won't have anyone left to control." For a moment, I thought maybe he'd crack. Maybe he'd laugh and say, "You finally figured it out." But instead, he walked closer. So close I could smell the faint hint of whiskey on his breath, and whispered, "Even if that were true, who would believe you?" And in that moment, I knew he was right. He had poisoned everyone against me so thoroughly that if I screamed the truth at the top of my lungs, all they'd hear was insanity. I was trapped in a cage he built, and the bars weren't steel. They were love, loyalty, and the lies he told in between. But here's the thing about cages. The longer you're in one, the more desperate you get. And desperation is dangerous. Because by then, I wasn't just thinking about escape. I was thinking about revenge. Desperation was a slow-burning thing. It didn't announce itself with fireworks and sirens. It crept up on me in the middle of the night, sat heavy on my chest, and whispered plans I never thought I would follow. It promised dangerous choices, but it also promised one very simple thing: movement, a way out. I told myself it wasn't revenge at first. I told myself I was being practical. I was reclaiming pieces of a life somebody else was shredding. But fantasy and reality are close cousins. And before long, the fiction I told myself bled into something uglier. I wanted him to feel what he'd made me feel. I wanted him to know the emptiness he'd sown. I wanted him to be as powerless and betrayed as I was. I started small, the way you had to when you're testing a wild idea. I left the house early in the morning and took the bus 2 towns over. I sat in the library and watched the clock, pretending I was waiting for nothing special. But I had a plan. I began meeting people anonymously. A woman at the library with a bored smile who helped me print an application. A man who owned a small trucking business and who could offer me a ride if needed. An aunt of a friend who ran a boarding house for girls going to college and who might take me in temporarily if I could get there. Everything felt fragile, as if one wrong move would blow the whole thing apart. Daniel had so many eyes on me. He had friends in the police, in the church, on the diner staff. He had become the town's silent puppet master. Any hint of me slipping away would spark a dozen false alarms. So I started to leave in small fragments. A day here, a night there, always with a careful explanation prepared. A plausible story to soothe my parents. I was helping a friend, I would say. I had to work late, or I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk. No one asked too many questions if Daniel was the one explaining. That's the insidious power of his role in our family. He wasn't just the antagonist, he was the narrator. He told the story, and everyone believed him. They wanted to believe him. He had rehearsed his lines for so long, they sounded like truth. The first serious step was the bus ticket. I saved for days, doing extra shifts at the diner where my boss, who liked me and didn't pry, let me pick up double closes when another server called out. I tucked the cash into my underwear drawer under a folded towel and counted it each night until the total felt real in my hands. I remember the day I bought the ticket like someone else remembers the last day of summer before college. Every detail exaggerated by nerves. I walked into the ticket office with my heart pounding, palms damp. The man behind the counter asked where I was going. "Anywhere with a college," I blurted, and then I realized how ridiculous I sounded. He smiled kindly, like old men do when young folks speak as if the right destination will fix all their problems. "It's a long ride," he said. "You sure you want this?" I nodded. I was sure in the way someone is sure they'll hold their breath until the world rearranges itself. I kept that ticket folded in my pocket for a week, and each day, my courage and my fear wrestled each other. In the privacy of the bathroom, I would hold the ticket and whisper plans to it like a prayer. The ticket listened without judgment, a small piece of paper that believed in the possibility of movement. And then, as if sensing that things might actually change, Daniel shifted. His surveillance grew more intrusive. He started checking my drawers at night while I slept. He'd sit on the couch and watch the road with binoculars, muttering about strangers and unclean influences. He tracked my phone location. He even installed a little camera by the back door, for Dad's safety, he said, mounted in a way that could easily see who came and went. I wanted to rip that camera from the wall. I wanted to throw it into the landfill and dance on its broken plastic face. Instead, I learned to mask my movements. I timed my exits for when the bus depot had the fewest regulars. I used a burner phone I'd bought with the saved cash for calls to the aunt who said she'd help me. I prepared answers, rehearsed my face for the moment my parents might cry or beg for me to stay. If anyone could spin my leaving into a drama, they would all collectively prefer we avoid. It would be Daniel. The night I decided to go, I slept in fits and starts. The ticket a lump of heat against my thigh. I would have left at midnight, but my plan wasn't about drama. It was about stealth. I gave my parents a note that said I'd be at a friend's house, a story ordinary enough to withstand a casual curiosity. I packed only what I needed into a small duffel. The suit for interviews I'd saved for, a few dresses, my acceptance folder folded tight, money secreted in the lining. I left a plate on the table, half finished, as if I'd be back soon. I turned off the porch light so it looked like everyone was asleep. At 2:13 a.m., I slid the duffel over my shoulder, opened the side gate, and felt the cool air hit my face like a hand offering relief. I slipped down the lane, my breath loud in my ears. The street was a river of shadows. I kept my head low, my footsteps soundless. I made it to the bus stop without incident. The city lights flickered in the distance like a promise I hadn't quite earned. My skin prickled with the cold and with the knowledge that each step forward was a point of no return. At the depot, the night manager looked at my ticket. "Where to?" he asked, bored and cheerful in the small hours. I said, "Anywhere," and then met his gaze with a small lie. "I'm going to get a fresh start." He stamped my ticket, and for the first time in years, I felt like the center of my own life, rather than a satellite caught in someone else's orbit. The bus hummed to life. My hands gripped the worn armrest, and when we pulled away, the town's lights blinked out gradually, as if I were erasing pencil marks from a map. I watched the silhouette of the place where I grew up shrink into nothing, then into a memory, and then, finally, into a dot. I should have been singing then, a wild, triumphant solo. Instead, I cried. I cried for the years stolen, for the small cruelties that had become daily torments, for the mother who couldn't see, for the father who was too weak to fight, for the brother who had learned how to wield family like a weapon. The first hours were disorienting. The bus smelled like stale coffee and carpet. People slept across from me with their mouths open like cave mouths. I clutched my duffel like a shield. At each stop, I watched potential threats. Regulars scanning faces, someone who knew names. It was a world of strangers, and yet I felt watched. Like a character in a story that still belonged to someone else. At dawn, the bus pulled into a larger terminal in a town I didn't know. I stepped down, the cool air slapped to my face, and I felt strangely small. But I wasn't going to be small for long. I reached for my pocket and felt the corner of an envelope with the address of the aunt who'd promised a room. The folds were soft from being unfolded and refolded. I had rehearsed my story for her. The soft, exhausted tale of leaving home to study. As if the truth needed gentle edges to be palatable. The aunt's house smelled of lavender and bread. She was older, but her eyes were sharp. She took me in without drama. "Young women leave every day," she said, "and some come back stronger." She made me tea and gave me a bed. She didn't ask too many questions. She seemed to have a knack for taking in the pieces of other people's lives and setting them gently on a shelf where they could be sorted and repaired. For 3 days, I slept and showered and let the city noise wash over me. I applied to small clerical jobs, places that would at least keep me afloat. I pinned my hopes on a college recruiter I'd managed to email using the library computer, begging for any opening. I practiced phone interviews with the aunt, listening like an invisible coach, correcting my pause, reminding me to sound confident. It felt ridiculous and terrifying to depend on someone else's goodwill for my future, but at least I was moving. But movement breeds attention, and attention births consequences. On the third day, my burner phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. The message was short and immediate. "We know where you are. Go back. It's better for everyone." My hands turned to ice. For a second, I didn't know if my heart was beating or if the blood had just stopped in my fingers. I raced to the aunt's cramped kitchen and swallowed the message like a bitter pill. "It's probably wrong," I told her, my voice trying to be steady. "Someone's playing games." She looked at me, not unkindly. "Child, keep that phone hidden. You're not safe telling strangers where you are." I did as she said, and then deleted the message, though its edges stayed like a bruise. Who could have sent it? The town was small. Daniel had more contacts than I'd ever known. Did he have someone watching the bus? Did he know where the aunt lived? Would he come? Fear pushed like a tide. I began to understand the price of miscalculation. He could make me backtrack with a simple threat. He could convince my parents I'd run away for attention. He could, God help me, make my new life impossible before it began. I wasn't sure whether to run or to stand. I pinched the bridge of my nose until stars swam. The aunt's house felt suddenly too quiet, its walls too thin. In the end, I did what scared me most. I stayed. I kept my head down and told myself that exposure would bring worse consequences than patience. Days stretched. I found a temp job that paid enough to live modestly. I ate at small diners and sent money home to my parents under the guise of paying for household expenses so they wouldn't ask what I was doing. The freedom was thin and fragile, but it was mine. For the first time in a long time, I could make choices without consulting Daniel's moods. And then, 2 weeks after I left, everything exploded. It happened on a Wednesday, when the sun was a merciless, bright coin in a cloudless sky. I had taken a morning shift and was planning to meet a recruiter in the afternoon. I left early to pick up paperwork and walk down a busy street because it felt safe to be amongst strangers. I had my hair tucked into a low hat and kept my eyes forward. I saw the first sign before I recognized it. A woman walking the other way glanced at me twice, then muttered something under her breath and crossed the street. A second later, 2 men in an older sedan slowed at the light and stared. My stomach rolled. I felt the small, familiar pressure in my chest that meant someone else had seen me and recognized me for what I was. Someone who'd left. By the time I reached the corner bakery, the bell above the door jingled like a warning. I glanced back over my shoulder. There, across the street, leaning against the cold glass of a closed storefront, stood a figure I never expected to see in a city miles away from home. It was Pastor Hines. He caught my eye the way a hawk catches a rabbit, calm, purposeful, and hungry for the kill. His mouth moved, not in words I could hear, but in the particular shape he made when he was about to accuse someone. He was not alone. Beside him was Mrs. Landry from our church, and, if I blinked and focused hard enough, Claire from high school. The same Claire who'd once made me cry for weeks over a dress. My breath hitched, and the world narrowed. They looked like a jury assembled of people who'd come to pass a sentence. In my pocket, my phone buzzed again. Go home, child. It's better for everyone. My hands went cold. I tried to tuck the phone away, to move quickly past them, but Pastor Hines saw me walking and crossed the street in a calculated diagonal, cutting me off. His eyes were full of that righteous concern that had once made my parents trust him like a saint. Now, it looked like a weapon. Child, he said, his voice low and loud and public all at once. We need to talk. There is a humbling cruelty to being confronted by the people who once held your faith like a shield. They have the power to make silence seem like confession and pity seem like guilt. The bakery's bell jingled again as customers watched. I felt my privacy buckle. My heart tried to leap out of my throat. Please, I started. But the first words out of my mouth came clipped and defensive. I don't want trouble. Pastor Hines smiled, and the smile was practiced. We're only trying to help. Your family is worried. We all are. You need to come back so we can set things right. I looked at them. The pastor, Claire with her 2 white teeth, Mrs. Landry, whose face now held the same look my mother had when Daniel told her something dark. And my chest burned with anger so hot it eclipsed fear. They were doing his work for him. They were munitions in his arsenal, recruited to suffocate me. I should have run. I should have turned and juked through the alley while they argued theology and scripture and morality. I should have swallowed my pride and sprinted away. But some acts of restraint are rooted not in bravery, but in calculation. I stayed because if I ran in front of witnesses, they would say I'd been chased. If I complied, they would say I'd returned to the fold. Either way, Daniel would be able to spin the story into whatever he needed. So I did something I had never done before. I lied. I lied with a face like a sacrament. I just stopped for coffee, I said, my voice soft as cotton, my smile practiced to look like a peacemaking grin. I'll come by later and talk. Thank you for your concern. They watched me, and in their eyes, I could see the gears turning, the calculus that would let them go back and tell my parents I'd been met with kindness, and that I'd agreed to a talk. They turned away with nods and murmured assurances. I walked out of the bakery and into the street, every step feeling like a victory I hadn't earned. I kept walking until the city swallowed me again, until traffic and noise made my heart beat a solitary drum. I didn't look back, but I felt eyes on my back long after the bakery and their smug sense of righteousness were gone. When I finally called the aunt and told her what happened, her voice was flat. They tried that once before, years ago. Small towns get people to do their dirty work. Don't give them the satisfaction of a fight. Keep your head down and keep living. I wanted to tell her I was done hiding. I wanted to tell her that hiding had become my life and that life was no life at all, but I didn't. I nodded at her silence and then, on the inside, I let something else grow. A new, chilly resolve. If Daniel was going to use the town, the church, and the very people who raised me against me, then I would stop pretending this was a private family quarrel. I would expose the poison for what it was. I would make him pay the way he had made me pay. The confrontation didn't happen in some dramatic courtroom or police station. It happened where all our wars began, in my parents' living room. I came back. Not because I wanted to, but because hiding wasn't living. And if I didn't end it, He would always find ways to pull strings from a distance. The night I walked in, the house smelled the same. Fried onions, musty curtains, the faint tang of antiseptic from Dad's room. But the tension was thicker than air. Mom looked at me with tears in her eyes. Dad wheezed from the armchair, and Michael stood in the center, like a conductor waiting for the first note. "You've embarrassed this family," he started. Calm, steady, rehearsed. "Running away, lying. Do you know how much you've put Mom through? Dad? They're ashamed of you." I stared at him, my chest burning. "No, Michael, they're ashamed because you told them to be." Mom gasped. "Don't talk to your brother that way." I took a step forward. "You want the truth?" Every time I got close to leaving, to building a life, he tore it apart. The fake letter from the university, the missed interviews, the whispers you all believed. It was him. He wanted me trapped here. Michael smirked. "Paranoid. You hear yourself? You're unwell." But then I pulled out the proof. The phone. The messages. The calls traced back to him. Screenshots of emails he'd sent from fake addresses. Receipts. I laid them all out on the coffee table like evidence in a trial. The silence was deafening. Mom's hand trembled over her mouth. Dad let out a ragged cough that sounded almost like a sob. Michael's mask cracked for just a second. And in that second, I saw what he had been hiding all along. Not just control, not just jealousy. Fear. Fear that if I left, he'd be exposed for what he really was. A man who had nothing without his power over me. "You needed me broken," I said quietly. "Because as long as I was broken, you could pretend you weren't." His face twisted. "If you walk out that door, don't you ever come back. Not for them, not for me. You'll regret it." I picked up my bag. My hands were steady for the first time in years. I've regretted every day I stayed. I'm done. I walked past him. He didn't stop me this time. It's been months since that night. I built a life elsewhere. Small at first, fragile, but mine. I send money home for Dad's care, though I know Michael touches some of it. Mom calls sometimes, her voice caught between love and loyalty. Dad. His voice is weaker, but when he says, "I'm proud of you," I cling to it. As for Michael, I heard he still lives in that house, still spinning stories, still trying to convince the town that I'm the lost one. Maybe he even believes it, but I know the truth. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. The part I can't say out loud to anyone but myself. I didn't just escape him, I became him. Because now, when people get too close, when I feel the risk of losing what I've built, I catch myself twisting the truth, pulling strings, shaping the narrative. I hear his voice in my head, teaching me how easy it is to control people if you know their weak spots. I hate him for what he did to me. But the haunting part is this. Sometimes I wonder if he didn't just sabotage my career. Maybe he rewired me. Maybe he made sure I'd never truly leave him at all.